From Epstein to Insurrections, the upcoming Schumer shutdown, and a whole lot more. Our guest today is Mike Rogers. We're going to talk about that and so much more. GrokTALK starts in less than 60 seconds. New Hampshire Republican Governor Kelly Ayotte has been making a lot of noise about how she's funding education. The Republican budget she just signed provides more money for education than ever before. She even bragged the other day that New Hampshire is top 10 in the country when it comes to funding our children's education, as if giving money to school systems has anything to do with learning. If you look at the math, and if you got schooled in New Hampshire, the odds are good it's not your best subject. It's the exact opposite. The more money we throw at schools, the less kids learn. We're committed to wasting money on an experiment that failed, unless wasting money to drive parents to homeschool their kids was the goal. We prefer to pick on Democrats, lower hanging fruit and all that, but our rhetorical woodshed doesn't discriminate. If that sounds refreshing, you need to check us out. This is Steve McDonald for GraniteGrok, and we'll keep shining the light on them for you.
GrokTALK.
Welcome back to another edition of GrokTALK, brought to you by GraniteGrok.com and Grok Media, LLC. After an interesting morning of attempting to record a different interview, I had some technical issues, just like I did last week. And that's not going to work for us. So I called on my buddy and longtime Grokster Mike Rogers, and he has consented to spend some time talking to us about the news of the day, the hot topics of the week, the month, the year, forever. And we're just going to see where the conversation goes. So good day, Mike, and thanks for stepping up and helping me out here.
You're welcome, Steve.
Good.
I actually happen to have some time this afternoon, and it's just a pleasure to catch up. So let me see. I rattled off a couple of things. Did you make notes? Because I went off and did other stuff.
I did. We have the big, beautiful bill, Epstein rescission package, the Schumer shutdown, J6ers versus the new insurrectionists. I also pulled up some other stuff that I was looking at while I was poking around the internet. We have, let's see, wow, so much going on. We have Ketanji Brown Jackson keeps showing America why she doesn't belong on the Supreme Court.
Oh, absolutely.
11,571 Epstein documents currently on appeal in one FOIA case with Maureen Comey involved. So there's a lot of things here we can talk about. Start wherever you want, and we'll just go from there.
All right. Well, the big, beautiful bill actually passed. It got somewhat warped in the Senate, which we knew it would, trying to wrangle any one of three cats onto the reservation. And that's never easy. You know, it's an interesting demonstration of legislative sausage making. It's especially interesting that the Republicans mostly held it together through that and managed to get it done without the Democrats. There were a couple of things along the way. Elon Musk got bent out of shape because his cuts weren't all in there, not that they ever could be, because a reconciliation bill has limits on what you can and cannot hack in such a package. But the most annoying things to me were the dishonesty of the partisan panels, I guess, which are part of Congress. First of all, the Congressional Budget Office, which can't count if you even put an abacus in front of it, because it always reckons that all of your money belongs to it before you start. So we're here trying to cement the previous tax cuts, which caused the economy to boom and government revenues to increase, not decrease. And they want to start from the point of which, but that doesn't exist because it'll expire soon. So that's a cost to the government. And then the new tax cuts you want are a cost to the government. And then the little things that you want to cut aren't enough, and the deficit's going to run up more trillions. And the whole thing's totally dishonest, but that's because the CBO, A, doesn't understand economics, and B, is basically a Democrat partisan group, and C, has no position in the Constitution. In other words, why don't we ditch it? I'm not sure it even needs an act of Congress to ditch it. If it's, can it be done by a majority of one house or the other? On the one hand, say, well, CBO says it'll cost more, letting you keep some of your own money, so we'll say you can't do that. And then on the other hand, but we want to spend a couple of trillion extra on the inflation increase bill, but that's an investment in the people, so We're going to ignore the CBO for that one.
Treasury announced a $27 billion surplus in June from tariffs. So that was interesting. If they're worried about any of the money, that's not coming from taxes on tips.
I think that's going to run a couple of $100 billion a year. And since the only really fair taxes are sales taxes and tariffs, it would be jolly nice if the federal government went back to funding itself by tariffs and maybe a tithe on the states for their mutual defense. But hey, that ain't going to happen unless you get a Senate full of Rand Pauls, and one of them's awkward enough, frankly.
108 billion so far in customs duties since February. So at least 200 billion seems reasonable.
And that's pretty good. And when you consider that there will be more tariffs rather than less, not necessarily all huge, but suitably proportional to encourage better behavior.
Well, the big beautiful bill was a pretty amazing thing for a lot of other reasons. Mr. Trump wanted it.
The fact that they got it through at all, the fact that it included border enforcement, border wall, actually got some cuts, took some illegals off of government services. I mean, all these things are actually an amazing achievement. Poor old Elon was expecting his $2 trillion of Doge Cuts, which, by the way, I don't think his group's actually got to yet. But he was expecting that to somehow happen in the big, beautiful bill.
Yeah, and the point I wanted to make was they got that done, as messy as it was, by July 4th, which is what the president wanted. And there was a lot of speculation that they were going to have a hard time getting it done over the summer, or they didn't think they could even get it through by now, and they did, which is just politically an impressive feat because they don't want to do it. Even the people who voted for it are kind of like, I'd rather just do nothing.
And that's the problem. They'd rather kick the can and let the country go bankrupt. And the whole reason we had Elon Musk on board for a while, and I think he'll be back, is because if we don't do something, the country will go bankrupt. And, Cloud and Piven will be smiling if they're not in their graves yet, having collapsed the country by spending us out of control and, top down, bottom up and all that, a flood of illegals and an excess of spending, and pretty soon you've got no country at all.
Yeah, that is a problem. So right now there's 175 billion in identified Doge cuts. The rescission bill that passed the House
is 9.8 billion and mostly takes a hack to USAID and NPR.
Yeah, something like I had it in front of me a second ago. Where'd it go? 8.3 billion in cuts to USAID and 1.1 billion clawback from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. So there's a lot of whining and complaining about defunding NPR and PBS as if they can't somehow find a way to fund themselves, or if they're such an essential part of America. I don't agree with that. I think that right now anybody can become their own media company overnight from their house. NPR and PBS and the whole business should just raise the money. If the liberals love it so much, and there's plenty of liberal billionaires, and I've written about this, give them the money.
There's plenty of liberal cat ladies that get dunned every month for more money by NPR. There's no reason at all why they can't tap the wealthy, college-educated white liberals that are perfectly happy being told by NPR to hate themselves and the country.
Well, they are the ones calling for violence and shooting, and it's only $1 billion. That's it. I don't see why. I mean, they gave Kamala $2 billion for a 100-day campaign.
It's one of those little things that you need to get rid of.
Yes, you do. And I know that's why they don't like it, because they're like, you can't cut anything. And, all these cuts are like, the State Department wants to cut 3,000 people. A bunch of other agencies are all cutting staff. SCOTUS just gave Trump permission to go ahead and start culling the federal farm of all its extra cattle. And everybody's freaking out as if there's no way possible that the government could do whatever it's supposed to do. And obviously it does way more than it's supposed to do with fewer people in it. And yet, we have AI and all this other stuff, and businesses are constantly streamlining. Why can't the government do that? Well,
it could. Just like fraud and overlap was identified in Social Security and Medicare by the Doge team, and the people in there said, basically, thank God you guys have shown us how to do it. We had ideas, but nobody would let us. But there's more on the dishonesty of getting a bill through, because you've not just got the CBO who only know how to cook the books in one direction. There's also the Senate parliamentarian, another position that doesn't exist anywhere in the Constitution and seems to be nominated by the majority leader on a whim, and the last one was nominated by Harry Reid. Don't you think it's time to broom her out of there?
Yeah, it
I
definitely
suspect,
is.
like the Senate rules, it only takes a simple majority. But this woman caused them to take all sorts of good stuff out of the beautiful bill because, well, you're not allowed to do that in that kind of bill. Well, who says so? Thune only needs to pass a rules change with a simple majority and bang the gavel down.
Yeah, when I did my interview with Phil Kerpen last week, he was talking about a bunch of stuff that the parliamentarian didn't like that was entirely fiscal and very much relevant to that sort of process in the Senate. And then there was other stuff that wasn't fiscal at all that she was like, oh, yeah, that's fine. So there's clearly got to be a call, a stronger call. I think the bill definitely got some people alerted to the fact, A, that there is a position called the parliamentarian, and that position is a roadblock to progress of the smaller government variety, and that person needs to go.
It gives the Democrats an additional amendment vote, basically.
Yeah, you'd think they have enough lawyers to do that. They don't need a parliamentarian.
They do not.
All right, so what else is on our list? Where'd it go?
Well, there's Ketanji Brown Jackson, who showed her stupidity so badly that first Amy Coney Barrett decided to grow a spine and slap her around. But it got worse because she then gave an opinion so unmoored from reality on topics that were not in front of the court, but she thought fit with the case under consideration, that even Sonia Sotomayor said, don't be ridiculous. This argument is not before the court. You can't use it.
Yeah, she's not going anywhere, of course. I don't think that even in the worst of circumstances that a Republican majority larger than the one we have now would actually impeach her, because that would just freak everybody out. But to be honest, and not necessarily Ketanji Brown Jackson, but there are an awful lot of judges who are doing things that really would warrant having them be impeached. And of course, Boasberg in D.C., all these,
Well, and LaPlante in New Hampshire, who thinks he can create a class out of thin air without paying proper attention to the set of rules that the Supreme Court referred to when they said no more nationwide injunctions, but if you have the right kind of class and you follow Rule 23, I think it is, that maybe we'll think about it. Well, this guy LaPlante dreamed up a class full of babies, which were really the screaming tots at the ACLU, and decided to issue a nationwide injunction against the proper enforcement of the 14th Amendment. That's going to have to go somewhere. The original intent of the writers of the 14th Amendment is absolutely in line with what Trump's trying to do, and it's been subverted for enough decades that the liberals think it's permanent, like they thought Roe versus Wade was permanent.
Well, when you give a bunch of robed guys and girls the power to change anything whenever they feel like it, nothing's permanent, ever.
No, well, so I think co-equal needs to be enforced. We need a national address here to say, look, guys, it's like this. I'm going to faithfully execute the laws. If Congress doesn't like the result, it can change the laws. Good luck getting 60 senators. If Congress thinks I'm misapplying the laws, you can take me out. Good luck getting 67 senators. And meanwhile, dear Supreme Court, thanks for your opinion.
Yeah, I know. He does. It does seem like it's coming to that. I know that he has mentioned repeatedly that he's not there yet, but I think Mr. Trump will get to a point, since SCOTUS recently ruled that these injunctions were not appropriate, and of course there's so many ways around that decision, and we've already seen it. They're still doing it. I think they're really doing it not just to stop the agenda, but to get him to actually say, I don't have to listen to you. And then they can jump on their he's a king thing again and try to rattle that cage until the midterms. But so far, Mr. Trump has been relatively deferential to the court and allowed the process to take its appropriate path. And I don't know how much longer he can do that, but he's really only been in office for 6-7 months. So
Well, he will end up having to do it in order to get the results he wants before the midterms. And it's most unfortunate that he has to do this. And I frankly wonder about the utility of federal district courts in the first place. You have a series of courts in the states that are designed to handle district matters, and when you exhaust those and you get to the state Supreme Court, then it can be brought before the national Supreme Court. There's really no reason why these federal districts and circuits exist, although I suppose you could argue that they're there to adjudicate federal law, which is a problem in itself. There should be very little of that.
I know. There's just too much.
Well, that's the constitutional view. There should be very little federal law. There should be no federal law that duplicates state laws, like a murder is a murder. You don't have to call it something else to make it a second charge, which really just comes down to, hey, what rules and laws should the Congress create and the federal government enforce? Exhibit A, of course, being immigration law, which not only is a federal set of laws, it was explicitly put in the Constitution to ensure that the federal government set a uniform set of rules for immigration and naturalization. It's the one thing that you can say, guess what? We have the authority. It goes all the way back to the Constitution, and you can't say no.
Well, we can hope for that. And, we've seen a lot of amazing things since Trump 2.0 started, so don't hold your breath, or you don't have to hold your breath. I think we'll see a lot more happen. A lot of people are hung up on the Jeffrey Epstein thing, and with good reason, because, there's lots of nonsense going on there, and they've pretty much just said, no, nothing to see here, move along, please. And yet that's physically impossible given all the things we factually know to be true. And so I think this is their biggest foobar so far, or maybe their only foobar, where they've actually come out and basically lied about it. And I think that's the issue. It isn't even the Epstein thing itself. It's lying about the documents that we know exist and just saying, listen, we're going to move along.
I think they thought they'd got their hands on the documents, and it turned out that maybe the deep state had disappeared a bunch of them. And if you really think about it, Jeffrey Epstein was rich. Not sure how totally legit the source of his wealth was. But a guy doing the kinds of things he did as a prime target for the FBI, and if it's international, maybe the CIA as well. And yet he was allowed to continue for a couple of decades, which the real concern is that, in fact, he was an instrument of the deep state, collecting compromat on the people that the deep state wanted to influence. And in that kind of interpretation, you could see why, A, he'd be disappeared, and B, the evidence would be mostly useless.
Well, I think there's a lot of people who think, and there's a lot of data out there, and a lot of people who are a lot smarter than me and know more than I do about this, that have drawn all of the appropriate connections between Epstein, how he came into his money and power. It was pretty much handed to him. And then the influence that he had and the connections that he had were all basically given to him. And it seems pretty obvious to me that he was definitely working with CIA, probably Mossad, and who knows to what depth, but there's a lot of blackmail information. I think it was just a big honeypot scam, and they collected a lot of stuff about a lot of people, and not everybody who was on the plane and not everybody who was on the island probably engaged in sexual activity with what appears to be minors, but somebody did. That whole thing was there. We have victims who have brought evidence and made charges. We have literally thousands and thousands of documents on this gentleman and the things he's supposed to be associated with. So something was happening, and there's a lot of questions. People are like, well, did the Trump administration discover that it was to their advantage to keep that stuff hidden and use it as leverage for everything else in the MAGA agenda? And maybe that's true, and I wouldn't be so off bad with that as long as it was above board enough that they weren't, literally blackmailing people, but they were just basically saying, look, we could let this go public, or you could work with us on this trade deal and we could have some trade balance, something like that. That it's still really super sketchy. My problem is that they lied about it. The documents exist. How many and how much and in what form that's available still is another matter. But I think that they need to come clean on that.
And I still think that they thought they'd got a trove of documents from the New York offices of the DOJ and found out they came up empty-handed when they actually went through the stash. There's a lot going on. Pam Bondi is doing a lot of good work, and Dan Bongino, and I think who else?
Kash Patel.
They're all, Dan Bongino and Kash Patel, thank you. They're out there doing good work. They're prosecuting things that need to be prosecuted, and they've certainly got their hands full. I wonder if they're going to have to circle around and take another go at this, but it is sketchy, and it's looking like a hit job worthy of the Red Queen, to be perfectly frank.
Well,
Thinking of the Red Queen, do you remember Bill in the blue dress, the picture that Jeffrey Epstein had on his island?
Yes, I posted it.
Well, I saw a meme the other day. Maybe it was the one you posted.
I think so.
Big beautiful Bill with Bill in his
the original
blue dress.
Big Beautiful Bill. Yes. Yeah, I posted that either Wednesday or today. I don't remember which, but we've put that up on GraniteGrok. If you we have lots of memes on GraniteGrok. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday we try to have as many new memes as we can manage. Today I published close to 70. So, we do well over 150 to 200 a week. So that's one of many. Well, people love them. We get a lot of traffic on those posts, and it brings people onto the website, and they check out other stuff. So the rescission package, they wanted it passed by the 18th. It's the $9.4 billion. Do you think they're going to get it?
I think Trump's going to have to go in there as salesman in chief again. Really quite disappointing that you've got a couple of senators who want this and a couple of senators who want that. It's like, guys, these are costs that have to be cut. How the hell are you going to handle the big cuts if you can't handle the little one?
And that leads us to the next topic, which is what are they going to do when the budget comes due? So Schumer has already come up and said he's prepared to try to shut the government down, which, back in March he wanted to, but everybody called it the Schumer shutdown and he backed off. And he got a lot of crap from his base for that. And people started calling for his removal. It was pretty amusing. And you had an interesting suggestion, which is the only suggestion that really matters, which is that they should take the entire budget, break it into separate bills by department, and force them to vote up or down on every single one.
Right, because I think you're going to end up with a lot of departments that get shut down, and then you discover you don't need them.
Yeah, but and of course, as you pointed out, and every time the shutdown thing comes up, we talk about this. If you just say, all right, this is defense, this is, this is agriculture, this is education, this is this. And it also gives, the Republicans an opportunity to clean house a little bit. And of course, the Democrats could say, well, we think your cuts are too deep. And that might be their excuse. Probably is. But is it really too deep? I mean, just the Department of Education, for example, which is another one of those right-wing hobby horses. Why do we even need that? We don't. Every state has their own.
I think Linda McMahon is trying to use the laws on the books to get some of the agenda through, and I still think she wants to close it down. She knows what she was put there for.
Right, and I think that would be a great idea, but we'll see how it goes. I think there will be lots of hijinks and stuff like that. All right, last topic. J6ers versus the actual insurrectionists.
Exactly. I mean, if you accidentally wandered either too close to the Capitol or were encouraged by the doors being open to foolishly go inside and maybe get yourself beaten up or shot for your trouble, you're considered to be an insurrectionist. Meanwhile, we've got armed insurrections going on all over the country, mostly Antifa and whoever's paying them, people in body armors carrying shiny new rifles and so on. This is the real insurrection. Again, the immigration folks are carrying out actual federal laws which are actually pursuant to a clause in the Constitution, and yet people all over the country think it's okay to try and stop this. I think the pot farm shenanigans yesterday or the day before were totally mishandled. I would have had paratroopers ready, and as soon as the insurrectionists arrived, I would have closed the trap, dropped the paratroopers around the perimeter, and herd them all into a big pen and say, okay, show me your proof of citizenship, and you better not be carrying any weapons, and you'll get off with just a warning. If you can't prove your citizenship, well, alligator Alcatraz beckons.
Well, excuse me.
And just to make sure that the vans don't get stopped, you bring in some big cargo helicopters, chain them in it, and depart for the nearest airbase before flying them to alligator Alcatraz.
The headline from Daily Caller is ICE rescues children at marijuana farm. LA mayor responds with sanctuary order. So we were talking about rescuing children and imprisoning the Americans who are keeping them there. That would probably be a good way to phrase that. I decided
the Democrats never got over losing their slaves the first time.
That's true. That's true. They do like to talk about who's going to mow my lawn and who's going to pick my blueberries and who's going to, well, it'll get done. Trust me. If there isn't enough labor, they will find a way.
And who's going to wipe my you-know-what, according to one of the Congress girls.
So we'll see how that turns out. Federal immigration authorities conducted a raid at a marijuana farm on Thursday in Camarillo, California. The Department of Homeland Security, DHS, previously confirmed to the Daily Caller News Foundation the administration revealed that 10 illegal migrant minors, 8 of whom were unaccompanied, were rescued during the operation. Quote, at the California marijuana facility, ICE and CBP, law enforcement rescued 8 unaccompanied migrant children from what looks like exploitation, violation of child labor laws, and potential human trafficking or smuggling. So that's what was going on there. If anybody's peddling it the other way, you know it's not true.
Oh, a lot of it's not true, and that's the problem. But, you know, I think everybody's learned some lessons. I still think you got to deal with the wobbly Congress people and senators. But I think Trump and his team are doing a stellar job of selling the results to the people. This is what we've actually done for you. You know, don't you want your Medicaid to keep going to the pregnant women and children and old people? Well, we took all the illegals off. You can thank me later. Don't you want your Social Security to keep on paying you? Well, we took the illegals off of fake disability benefits. You can thank us later.
I would agree, and I think that they. Go ahead.
And you can take the fat, pasty, lazy protesters off of Medicaid as well, unless they go and work. Did you see that one with all sorts of piercings all over his face, saying it would be inhuman to make him work 80 hours a month?
I know, and that was another thing I talked to Phil Kerpen about. Was the Medicaid scam. States were working with hospitals, charging 200 to 300% above what the actual rates were. And there was this money laundering scheme where they could use that to get extra federal dollars. You can read it. That was one of those Echo-issued podcasts that I couldn't actually publish in full, but I did have a transcript that had Echoed transcript in it, which I deleted out and I managed to massage into a post so that you could see what we talked about. There was a lot of fraud going on, and it was above-board legal fraud. The kind that robs millions and billions of dollars out of a system and basically for no good reason. And then we've got all these people.
In other words, the Democrats, through various bills, allowed the states to game the system, and so they gamed the system.
Well, it was Biden when he removed all the requirements for applying for Medicaid during COVID. They never rolled those back. So a person who went on Medicaid because they had been kicked out of their job or lost their job because the business went out while under COVID was collecting Medicaid. If they went back to work, nobody bothered to check. They could still keep getting the free insurance, as crappy as it is, and not have to pay for their own. So those are a lot of the people who are going to be pushed out because they're going to be required to show that they're actually legitimately, eligible for it in the first place. It's not people
working or trying to work. And look, I know you don't work 80 hours in 5 days, but there are plenty of us that work 60 to 80 hours a week.
Right, and we're not on Medicaid. That's why.
In busy times. And no, we wouldn't have dreamt of asking for it. In fact, as you say, it's crappy. So that's where you go when nothing else is available.
Well, the beauty of the big, beautiful bill, and we'll close on this, is that it basically makes Medicare reimbursement rates the same as Medicare, which is actually higher than the Medicaid rates used to be. But it makes it impossible for anybody to run the scam they've been running at the state level. And so we're going to save lots and lots of money. And you can cry all you want about kicking people off of it. We're talking about people who are working, people who can work. And would you want them coming and living in your house and living off your insurance and eating out of your pocket? And no. So that's what the deal is. All right, Mike, we've been at this for 30 minutes, and I really appreciate you making the time.
Thank you very much, Steve. Glad to help.
GrokTALK.
Independent media for New Hampshire, New England, the nation, and the world. Please feel free to support us by finding the donate button on any page at GraniteGrok.com.